Let's start with the day. Joyce could have set the novel on any day of any year. He was writing it between 1914 and 1921. He chose the 16th of June, 1904, and he chose it deliberately. That was the day, in Dublin, that he first walked out with a red-haired chambermaid from Galway named Nora Barnacle. They had met the week before on Nassau Street. She had, apparently, thought he was a Norwegian sailor. June the 16th, 1904, was the day Joyce fell in love with the woman he would live with and eventually marry for the rest of his life. In the private mythology of the man, it was the day the future began. And the book he wrote about that day is not about Nora and is not obviously about love. It is about a middle-aged Dublin advertising canvasser named Leopold Bloom walking around the city while his wife Molly, at home, prepares to have an affair with a man named Blazes Boylan at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It is about a young writer named Stephen Dedalus, drunk and grieving his dead mother, wandering the same city. It is about their paths, which cross and recross all day, and finally meet in a brothel and in a kitchen at 2 in the morning. The choice of Bloom's Day as Joyce's own private anniversary is the first joke of the novel. Everything in the world can happen on any day. The day that was meant to be the day Joyce was reborn, the day he chose, in retrospect, as the beginning of his adult life, was also, in the book, an entirely ordinary day in which nothing much happens and a man's wife cheats on him. There is a case to be made that Ulysses is the greatest love letter in 20th century literature. It is written in code. The 18 episodes of Ulysses map, loosely, to the 18 books of Homer's Odyssey. Bloom is Odysseus, Molly is Penelope, Stephen is Telemachus. That much is famous. That much is on every textbook chart. What the textbooks tend to underplay is that each episode is written in a completely different literary style. Episode 1, Telemachus, reads like a well-made Edwardian novel. Third person, clean prose, dialogue tags, weather. Perfectly conventional. Episode 7, Ulysses, is set inside a newspaper office and is written as newspaper copy, with headlines cutting into the narrative every few paragraphs. Episode 11, Sirens, is set in a bar and is written to imitate music, with themes and variations and a coda, opening with a tuning-up section of fragments that do not resolve until later in the chapter. Episode 14, Oxen of the Sun, is set in a maternity hospital and is written as a chronological history of English prose style, moving from Anglo-Saxon alliterative verse through Chaucer, Malory, Elizabethan drama, 17th century Latinate rhetoric, 18th century satire, Victorian sentimentality, and finally into the drunken slang of modern Dublin. The chapter enacts the growth of an embryo through the growth of English itself. Episode 15, Circe, is written as a hallucinatory stage play, hundreds of pages long, in which the characters, objects, and even ideas take on speaking parts. By the time you reach episode 18, Molly's soliloquy, you have been through so many styles that the mind is prepared, finally, for the possibility that prose can do without punctuation altogether. Because the mind, thinking to itself in bed at 2 in the morning, does not punctuate. And here is where the standard reading of Ulysses collapses. Ulysses is not difficult because Joyce was showing off. That is the accusation most often thrown at it. That it is a Chinese puzzle box built by a man who wanted to be admired for the difficulty of the puzzle. Joyce himself once said, half-jokingly, that he had put in so many enigmas and puzzles that the book would keep the professors busy for centuries, and that this was the only way of ensuring one's immortality. But the joke conceals the point. Ulysses is difficult because Joyce was trying to prove something. He was trying to prove that any single day, a random Thursday in a middling city in 1904, contains everything. The whole Odyssey. The whole of English literature. The whole of the human body, chapter by chapter, with each episode assigned an organ. Every meal, every bowel movement, every argument in a pub, every song in a bar, every menstrual pain, every prayer, every act of adultery, every death of a father. And no ordinary prose sentence can carry the weight of what a single day actually contains. If you are going to write an honest day, Joyce is saying, you cannot write it in one voice. You have to write it in every voice. Because a day is not one voice, a day is the newspaper you read in the morning, the music you hear in the afternoon, the medical textbook you consult when your wife is pregnant, the theater you attend at night, the private torrent of thought you fall asleep in. The difficulty is the argument. If Ulysses were easy, it would be lying about what a day is. Which brings us to the ban. In 1920 and 1921, before the book was even complete, the American magazine The Little Review had begun publishing episodes of Ulysses in serial form. The New York Society for the Suppression of Vice took them to court. Two of the magazine's editors were fined $100 for publishing episode 13, Nausicaa, which contains a scene of Bloom masturbating on a beach while watching a young woman named Gertie McDowell. That verdict effectively banned Ulysses in the United States. Any copy that arrived through customs was seized and burned. In 1923, in London, 500 copies of the second edition were burned by customs at Folkestone. In 1926, in New York, a similar shipment. For 11 years, if you wanted to read Ulysses in America, you had to smuggle it across the border. Copies came in from Paris wrapped in the covers of Shakespeare's works, or in false plaster busts, or bound into fake dictionaries. Then, in 1933, the publisher Random House, wanting the American rights, deliberately arranged for a copy of Ulysses to be intercepted at the port of New York. They brought a test case, United States v. One book called Ulysses. The case went to Judge John M. Woolsey of the Southern District of New York. On December 6, 1933, Judge Woolsey delivered an opinion that changed American publishing forever. He wrote that although the book contained many words usually considered dirty, these were the words that the persons Joyce is seeking to describe would actually use. He noted that the book was not written for its dirt. He wrote, "This is the famous line that in Ulysses, in spite of its unusual frankness, I do not detect anywhere the leer of the sensualist." He ruled that Ulysses was not obscene and could be legally imported and sold in the United States. That opinion cleared the way for Faulkner, for Hemingway's more explicit passages, for Henry Miller when he came, for Nabokov when he came. Every serious American book you can name that has a body in it is downstream of Judge Woolsey's December 1933 opinion. Modernist prose, in America, was legalized by one federal judge sitting alone in a Manhattan chambers reading a novel about a Dubliner masturbating on a beach. The book Joyce wrote about a single day in a city he had left made itself indispensable. It sits at the exact hinge of the 20th century. Before Ulysses, the novel was one thing. After Ulysses, it was another. And the argument is not that you have to like it. Plenty of great readers do not. The argument is that the difficulty is not vanity. The difficulty is Joyce insisting that a day, honestly rendered, is bigger than one style can hold. Molly's final sentence, "Yes, I said yes, I will yes," is what happens when you have been through 18 styles and finally arrive at a woman thinking her way toward the memory of the day her husband first proposed to her on Howth Head in Dublin, and she said yes. The book that took 7 years to write about one day ends on a woman saying yes to a memory of a moment that has already happened. That is the whole of Ulysses in one sentence. That is Joyce writing Nora, in code, into the last page of the biggest book of the 20th century. If this changed how you think about Ulysses, subscribe. We break down the most important books ever written, one argument at a time. New video every week. And if this was worth 10 minutes of your life, hit like. It helps the channel more than you think.